I'm Matthew Eadie from Evanston now. I just wrapped up my interview with Illinois State Senator Laura Fine, a candidate for Congress in the Ninth Congressional District of Illinois, looking to replace longtime Representative Jan Schakowsky, who's retiring from Congress after this term. We talked about a whole bunch of different stuff in this interview, including AIPAC and its support of her campaign, a super PAC that's also backing her, her position on healthcare, and the Democratic Party as a whole. Stay tuned for the entire interview. I'm joined now by State Senator Laura Fine. She is a state senator from Glenview, representing the Ninth State Senate District in the Illinois State Senate. She was formerly a state representative since 2013 and then became a state senator in 2019. And she joins me now. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to get right into it, and I want to start by giving you an opportunity to kind of give an initial pitch to voters. I'll do this at the very end as well. And so, a quick, brief intro pitch on why, in this field, as many people know, early voting has begun in some parts of the district. It starts in Chicago. Tomorrow, we're recording this on February 11th. There's a lot of candidates in this race, as you know, a lot of different personalities, a lot of different experience. For voters who are trying to figure out in these final few weeks who to vote for and why to vote for that person, we don't have ranked choice voting in this state. So it's one vote, that's all they get. Why should it be you?
That's a great question. We have a very diverse field with a lot of people who bring different things to the table. What I think makes me stand out from the other candidates in this race is my why story and what I've done with that. So, for people who are not familiar with how I got into office, I ran for office, gosh, more than 13 years ago. And I ran, we jokingly say, in my house by accident. And that accident happened when my husband was driving to work and he was hit head on by a truck. It got worse after that. Not only did he lose his arm in this horrific car accident, although we were lucky he survived, we found out early on that the person who hit him was underinsured and had about $20,000 in coverage. This was before the Affordable Care Act was put in place, and we had individual health care policies. So I immediately contacted the insurance company to let them know what happened. And they gave me a contact to say, if you have any questions, reach out to this person. You're going to be getting a lot of bills. So at the time, we had two young children. Michael was in the hospital for 5 weeks, had 8 surgeries in the hospital, two more later. And when he finally came home, trying to figure out how is he going to adjust to life with no left arm and chronic residual limb pain, we started getting collection calls and demand letters for unpaid bills. So I called up the insurance company to say, I don't understand what's going on. And the person who was my contact said, I can't talk to you. And I'm like, well, why can't you talk to me? And they hung up. We found out through our attorney that they were working to cancel our healthcare policy. And we, again, had two young children at the time and hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And all because my husband was driving to work one day. This put my family in a tailspin. What happened to my family was horrific and should not happen to anybody else's family. So when I get angry, I'm the type of person that has to do something. So what I decided to do was I went back to school. I got licensed in insurance and started studying insurance statute in the state of Illinois to see what needed to be changed. Some of the things I learned was a little bit shocking. I did not know at the time that Illinois' law allowed the insurance companies to have 2 years to cancel a policy if they could, quote unquote, find reason. I learned that Illinois was one of the top states when it came to canceling people's healthcare policies when they needed it the most. So I fought back. When the opportunity came to run for office, I ran for office and decided, I'm going to sit on the insurance committee and I'm going to change the laws. And I quickly learned how powerful the insurance lobby was because I was threatened physically, I was threatened emotionally. However, as the saying goes in my house, they picked a fight with the wrong woman because I made it my life's mission to make those changes. By the time I left the Illinois House, I was actually chairing the insurance committee. And if you look at my history of legislation, I've taken Illinois from a state that, in no easier words, threw consumers under the bus to now we're considered one of the most consumer friendly states in the country. I passed laws that I was told could never get passed. Because of my legislation, our Department of Insurance can reject rates that are too high. We have mental health parity in the state of Illinois. I even passed a bill last year that says none of your premium dollars can go towards a CEO bonus. I'm an effective legislator. I've been named Legislator of the Year by more than a dozen groups. And just last spring, I was named one of the most effective senators in Illinois by a nonpartisan think tank out of Vanderbilt University. So I think that's what separates me from my opponents is not only do I talk the talk, but I walk the walk and I get it done.
You talk at length, and I think if anybody's heard you introduce yourself before, they've heard that you've list your effectiveness in Springfield as one of your qualities as why you want to go to Washington. But as you know, Washington is one of the least effective places when it comes to Congress getting things done. Why do you want to run for Congress? And for someone who says if she's so effective in Springfield, why not stay there and continue getting things done? And are you concerned going to Congress could, dampen your ability to get things done because of how ineffective that body has been over the past, decades?
In my opinion, you can't give up. And right now, I am seeing firsthand how new federal laws are impacting people's health care here in Illinois and around the country. Uh, we are expecting in Illinois, with the loss of the subsidies on the Affordable Care Act exchange, 70 to 90,000 people to leave the private insurance market. So what does that mean? It means people are not going to have their insurance covered, which means they're going to wait until they're stage 4 to end up in the emergency room. It's unacceptable. That has to change. And we keep hearing about, oh, these changes are going to happen at the federal level. Well, don't pull the rug out from under us until that happens. And let's wait and see what's going to happen with Medicaid. When we lose Medicaid or the Medicaid rules change, we're going to see hundreds of thousands of people impacted by it. People who rely upon Medicaid are people with severe mental illness, who have disabilities, who are seniors on dialysis in nursing homes, and the new rules are going to be kicking people off Medicaid. What are they going to do? And not only that, the impact of how is this going to impact our rural hospitals that rely upon the Medicaid dollars to keep their doors open? What about the urban facilities that are going to be shutting down, for example, maternity wards because they're not profitable? So people will have to travel miles and miles if they want to deliver a baby in a hospital. These have real life implications. And right now, we need to send somebody to Washington who's willing to dig in, work on these policy issues to make sure that healthcare is a right and not a privilege in this country.
Let's stick with healthcare for a moment. When you launched your campaign, you launched it talking about how you support a public option. More recently, you've come out and said that you support Medicare for all. You have an ad on TV that says you support Medicare for all. And at recent debates and forums, you have noted that you would support Medicare for all. We've spoken about this before. I asked you about this a couple of weeks ago. Um, there's been some questions about why it took so long for you to publicly state that that was your position when some of your opponents in this race launched their campaigns after you with that position as part of their platform. What's your response to some people who point to that and say, what took so long? And if there's concern in voters' minds about is she going to be able to stand up and fight for progressive policies like that from the jump, or wait until they become more popular positions? What's your response to that? It's kind of a broad question. And then, well,
Sure.
yeah, start with that.
Okay. So first of all, you don't legislate through a web page. Also, it's really easy to legislate with slogans that sound great, but I'm the person who digs into policy and I know how to get the job done and I know the reality of it. And right now, especially with healthcare, we need to put everything on the table until we can reach that final goal. We can't just switch a switch and reach Medicare for all. We need the funding for it. We need to make sure doctors are going to accept it. We need to make sure that reimbursements are going to keep hospital doors open. So there's a lot of steps that need to be taken in order to get to this reality. Can we get there? Absolutely. But it's going to take thought, it's going to take determination, and it's going to take somebody who really understands what the underlying issues are for us to get there.
I'm wondering what the end goal is in your mind. There's some Democrats who have a different view on what Medicare for All actually means, despite there being a legitimate bill that outlines exactly what it means. Like, do you support the complete abolition of private healthcare industry? Do you think that there's room for it? What does Medicare for All actually mean for you? Because I've seen you kind of describe it as a Medicare for All system. So if you could just clarify what exactly your envision of that is.
My personal vision of it is the ability to do both. This is what we see in other countries, and I think this is what we can have here. What I am tired of and what my big concerns are is, I mean, my own personal situation. I had a doctor for many, many years who took my insurance, and my insurance wasn't paying enough. So she became a boutique doctor. Well, I was paying for insurance, and then I would have to pay for that doctor separately. Who can afford that? I mean, that's just out of reach of everybody. But at the same time, we know that Medicare is working for our seniors. Our seniors probably have the best health care that's out there. And why shouldn't that be available to everybody else? But like I said, we need to get there in a very mindful way. And part of the piece of that step towards that destination is looking at who is purchasing our hospitals and our doctors' offices and our healthcare agencies. We've got venture capitalists out there who are buying up all of these healthcare systems. As a result of that, the prices are going up and the care in healthcare is just not there. We need Congress to step in, put some pretty tough guardrails around the system so we can bring that care back to healthcare and make sure everybody can access it in an affordable way.
When you say you think there's room for both, you mean a still, if somebody wants to get private healthcare, that's potentially a system that you would still support. Maybe wealthier folks who can afford private healthcare, but a like an automatic buy-in program for everybody else. Is that kind of what you mean?
I think that needs to be the first steps. And then we can see how that works. And the best part about that is when we see what works, anything can be changed. That's part of the legislation that we've seen in Springfield along the ways. There are many times that we pass a piece of legislation, we find out what works, and then we have something called a trailer bill that improves that piece of legislation. And think we need to start taking those steps so we can reach it.
I want to move on to another topic. The Democratic Party is kind of at an identity crisis moment right now. Who's the leader of the Democratic Party? Where's it going? What is it ideologically following? You, in your endorsement from the Chicago Tribune, I believe it was last week, maybe it was the week before that, they listed not only your record in Springfield, but also at the very end, they commended you for leaving the Progressive Caucus in Springfield, specifically over the issue of Israel, which we will get to later. But I want to ask you if you still consider yourself a progressive and if you intend to join the Progressive Caucus in Washington if you're elected.
I am a true progressive. I actually have one of the most progressive voting records in the Illinois Senate. So nobody can take that away from me. That's who I am. That is my set of moral values. It was unfortunate what happened with some of the members of my caucus in Springfield who made me feel a little bit like an outsider in that caucus because of my opinion of what happened in Israel October 7th and in the aftermath. So when it comes to the Democratic Party, we need to have a very big tent. And it needs to be okay to disagree on some issues, but still come together with our set of moral values when it comes to progressive policies. And that is who I am. Anybody who knows me, who's worked with me over the years, will tell you that I meet with all groups, whether or not people agree with me or disagree with me. I feel like it's important to have those conversations, especially with the people who disagree with me, because I need to know where they're coming from. And in order, in my opinion, to be an effective legislator and an effective Democrat, you need to hear all voices and find out where we can come together. And I think that's where the Democratic Party needs to go.
Are there some issues, you say there's some set of moral values that the Democratic Party has to kind of be binded by? What in your eyes are those moral issues? Are there certain things that are a no-go? Some talk about abortion rights as one that the Democrats should be more open about and say, hey, we should welcome pro-life candidates into the party. Some talk about other issues. Are there any issues for you that are absolute must-haves when it comes to being a Democrat in 2026?
Yeah, in my opinion, being a Democrat means you're 100% pro-choice. You are someone who feels that healthcare is a right and not a privilege, and reproductive care is part of that right, is someone who's willing to stand up to the gun lobby and make sure that our kids are safe when it comes to firearms, especially in the home. I mean, I chair the mental health committee in the Illinois Senate. And, the statistics are very scary that if you're suffering from severe depression and you have access to a gun in your home, you're more likely to die by suicide than if that weapon was not available. Other issues that I think are so important that Democrats should not falter on are environmental issues and our move to 100% renewable energy, our move to making sure our lakes are clean, that we have clean water, that we have fresh air. I pride myself in my environmental record. I am the chair of the Green Caucus in the Illinois Senate. And I'm also chair of the organization called the Great Lakes Legislative Caucus, which is an organization made up of members of the Great Lakes states and the provinces in Canada, and how we can work together to make sure that our lakes are clean for drinking water, for economics, for recreation. And with this partnership, we make sure we get the federal funding that we need to make that possible.
If you are elected on March 17th, it's almost certain that you'll win the November general election. This is a deep blue city or deep blue district in a very blue state. It's almost winner take all in just a couple of weeks. And I think all the Democrats in this race understand that. And I think the voters likely do as well. That means, you'll have a long time before you take office in early January. But when you do take office, the first vote you'll take is on electing a speaker or party leader if the Democrats don't win back the House. Assume for a moment that they do win back the House, which seems like the direction that we're heading. Right now, the party leader is, of course, Hakeem Jeffries. There have been some Democrats who've expressed discontent with him as party leader. Do you intend on supporting him as Speaker of the House or party leader if you're elected to this seat?
I think Hakeem Jeffries is a very good man. And one thing that he did that really secured my positive feelings about him as a leader is how he drew a line in the sand when it came to healthcare and subsidies, because that's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I think that is just a piece of the puzzle that we cannot falter on. And so, with his leadership on that position, I thought that was very important and somebody who could, as the leader of the party, carry us forward.
So you would vote for him as Speaker?
Yes.
Okay. I want to move on to another topic that's come up recently, and that's campaign contributions and funding. It's something that has taken a lot of attention in recent weeks as we approach Election Day. You raised more money in this past quarter than any of your opponents, about $1.26 million, I believe. You've raised about $1.9 million total in this campaign, which is pretty much around the same as Daniel Biss, but less than Kat Abou-Ghazaleh, who many people would consider the three top contenders for this seat. You told Shaw Local in a recent questionnaire that your campaign is primarily powered by small dollar donors. I want to ask you about that specifically because I went and I looked at the numbers, and you actually have the least amount of small dollar donors compared to your opponents. About 3% of your campaign contributions have come from small dollar donors, which is, for people who don't know, $200 contributions or less. That's about $60,000 or so. And for comparison, uh, Daniel Biss is about 5%. So it is similar to where you're at. And then Kat Abou-Ghazaleh is about, she's raised about 30% from large dollar donors. So about 70% from small dollar donors. Can you kind of explain what you meant by that in that questionnaire? And then more broadly about the question of, is it important to have a grassroots small dollar donor campaign in being a progressive in 2026? If you ask some of the people in this campaign who have raised more money from small dollar donors, they would say, yeah, that is a proof of a grassroots people powered campaign, and not large dollar contributions of people who can write $7,000 checks.
Yeah, I'm contributions, Emily's List. Let's take that name. Early money is like yeast. So when you start raising a lot of money, more people start to pay attention to your campaign and start donating to your campaign. Uh, I am very proud of the people who are supporting me and supporting my election. I have more than 100 local electeds, past and present, who are supporting my campaign because they know the quality of my work and what I'm able to accomplish in Springfield. And anybody who's donating to my campaign is donating to somebody who they know and they can feel safe with the fact that I'm 100% pro-choice. I'm 100% pro-environment. I've stood up to the gun lobby. I've stood up to the insurance lobby. And that's what I intend to do when I get to Washington.
The question that's kind of come up, though, is you've received a significant portion of your contributions in the last quarter from out of state donors, more than anybody else in this race. And it makes up a very large portion of your total fundraising. I mean, the majority of your total fundraising. Everybody in this race, if you take all six of the top contenders, everybody's total contribution graphs look completely different from one another. But yours has the most out of state donors. Is there, I mean, what's your response to people who kind of point to that and say, why isn't she raising more money from the state of Illinois or from the ninth district specifically? And why is she raising so much money from people in different states, California, Florida, New York? Those are some of the states that have, raised significant portions of money for your campaign and have competed with Illinois as the top states contributing to your race. I mean, what's your response to people who are critical of that?
Well, in a congressional race like this, it's not surprising that people from around the country are getting involved in the race. And like you said, I have a lot of donors from right here in Illinois who know the quality of my work. But again, I'm going to say that anybody who's looking at me as a candidate or looking at this race is voting for somebody or contributing to a campaign of a woman who's got a really solid record. And it's a solid progressive record of being, again, 100% pro choice, 100% pro environment, who stood up to the biggest lobbies in Springfield. And a lot of people in this race can say, this is what I will do. But I'm telling you, not only is that what I will do, but that's already what I have done. And so people who are investing in my campaign are investing somebody with that record of accomplishments.
Part of this question kind of lies in something that I've covered extensively, as you know, since early in this campaign, and that is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee's support of your candidacy. I asked your campaign way back in September if you were aware of private or of fundraising emails that were sent to donors encouraging donors to contribute to you. Of course, AIPAC is one of the largest lobbying groups in the country. It is not the only lobbying group, but is a very powerful, very large bipartisan lobbying group that is quite influential because of its support of candidates throughout the country in fundraising, in advertisements. It has its own super PACs that it operates. Can you clarify for voters who are confused about this, who have heard about this, who have read and seen and heard people talk about it, are you aware that AIPAC is actively supporting your candidacy, even if they haven't publicly endorsed you?
So my campaign does not coordinate with independent expenditures. So anything that happens outside of our campaign is just as much of a surprise to me. A great example, I was in Springfield about a week and a half ago, and somebody sent me a new ad. I've never seen it before. What that tells me is we need more transparency. We need to know where these dollars are coming from, who is supporting these ads. Citizens United was a big disservice for our political system, and that's something that needs to be overturned. Uh, do I have a lot of Jewish donors who've donated to my campaign? Absolutely. Have some of these donors also donated to AIPAC? Most likely. But they're supporting a Jewish woman who has stood up for what I believe is a Tikkun Olam, which is repairing the world, and for a strong Israel-US relationship.
The question isn't that's not really wasn't really my question. It was more so AIPAC is supporting your campaign through emails. I mean, I've published them, I have them. I'm sure you've seen them. So, it should be a pretty easy question to answer. If it's are you aware that the group is supporting you? And if the answer is yes, it should be a fairly easy question to answer. If the answer is no, then it gets into a different question about transparency and stuff like that. But that's kind of the core of the question. And it has been since September when I initially asked the campaign about the fundraising emails before, more stuff about this came out. The very beginning was there were fundraising emails calling out your opponents, supporting you. And my question was, are you aware that these are being sent out?
I was not aware that those emails were being sent out. As a matter of fact, Matthew, I've learned a lot about what's going on by reading what you write. So I thank you for that because that's given me some transparency. But I do have to say, there was an email that went out in the beginning that was very upsetting to me because I felt like it was very critical to my opponents. And I feel like in this day and age, we have so much political violence that I think words are very important and harsh words should not be used to describe somebody and what their stands are. And so, when I saw, I think it was you that brought this email to my attention, I called them up and I said, it's just not acceptable. And that's not who I am.
You called AIPAC directly and spoke to them?
I did. When you made that email aware to me, listen, I am somebody who has been a victim of political violence. I've had the police sitting outside my house and overnight because of threats I've received. And so when I feel like anything is getting to a level of being threatening, it is just uncalled for and it shouldn't be happening.
So if the group is sending, I think what you're referring to, for people who don't know, I think I know what you're referring to, but for people who don't know, it's probably the one where they called Daniel Biss and Kat Abu-Ghazali dangerous detractors for their stances on U.S. military support to Israel, which we'll get to in a few minutes. I assume that's the email that you're referring to. If those
Yes.
emails are coming out, and I know that there's been some, but there very likely have been more. Would you reject AIPAC's support of your campaign, even if it's something that you're not directly involved with or aware of? If it's going on behind the scenes and the group is, using terminology or characterizations you don't agree with, why allow them to keep supporting your campaign? Why not, publicly or privately say, hey, I don't want this anywhere near me?
I have been very clear about transparency, that we need to know where these dollars are coming from. And here's the irony. Daniel Biss has a super PAC that has been sending out hundreds of thousands of dollars in mailers on his behalf. And this super PAC took $1 million from AIPAC last year. So this transparency is very important. We need to know where it's coming from. And for somebody to, criticize me for where this money is coming from, they have to look in the mirror and see what they are accepting on their behalf as well.
I mean, no question that this is not just your campaign. There are other campaigns. There are probably other super PACs that are preparing to jump into this race as well. You brought up the super PAC 314 Action, the super PAC supporting Biss's campaign. I do want to refer to the super PAC that's also supporting your campaign, though. Elect Chicago Women, I believe it's called. It's one of two super PACs that popped up in late January, one supporting Donna Miller in the second congressional district, and then Elect Chicago Women, which is supporting you, and Melissa Bean in the eighth congressional district, which is Raja Krishnamurthy's seat. Um, when I spoke to you, I believe it was last week, maybe it was a little longer ago than that, you had said that it was the day that the Super PAC went live with its ads. You said that you had not known about them, that you weren't aware of them, and it was a surprise to you. It's now been a week. Have you figured out who's behind those ads? And would you share publicly who's supporting your campaign?
I don't know who's behind the ads because due to the way the law is structured, they have not had to disclose who's funding them. That's why I think transparency is so important. These donors need to be disclosed. The public needs to know where this money is coming from and who's behind it. And I really think it's up to them to release that information. The public needs to know. I want to know. I want to know who's donating to these PACs that's supporting my campaign.
As I've reported and others as well, we've reported that it is AIPAC that is behind the ads. At the very least, it's one of AIPAC's super PACs. They go quietly into some other races. As I'm sure you know, just in New Jersey last week, AIPAC affiliated super PAC was supporting a candidate in that race with advertisements. Um, if it comes out publicly that it is AIPAC, which isn't going to happen very likely until potentially after the election, isn't that concerning to you to be the recipient of TV ads in favor of your campaign and have no idea who's actually behind them? I mean, isn't there a way around this to say I don't want? I mean, can't your campaign call the super PAC up and say I don't want you guys running ads with me unless you come out and say who you are? That feels like a potential workaround. I know you brought up 314 Action. Um, there's similarities, and 314 Action doesn't have its donors disclosed right now as well. But they've been around for longer than just a couple of weeks. As I referred to, Elect Chicago Women started 2 weeks ago and has not a single donor disclosed. So there's really no clear way to figure out who that is. I actually called the phone number listed on that super PAC, and the line dropped immediately. So there's a lot of non-transparency here, and if you're the candidate being the recipient of that, does that concern you?
Again, I would love the transparency because I would love to know who's behind these ads. And quite honestly, we have 5 weeks left in this election. And my guess is we're going to see a lot more dark money come into this race. They need to be transparent. We need to know where the money is coming from.
Okay. I want to move on to something that we kind of touched on indirectly, and that's U.S. military support for Israel, which is an important issue for a lot of people in this community because of its diversity on all different sides. And it is an issue that has dominated American politics for multiple years now. You have stated that you don't believe in tying Israel's hands. That's the terminology you used at a forum in Rogers Park a couple of weeks ago. You've kind of indicated you wouldn't support any conditions on U.S. military aid. I want to ask you kind of directly on that, though, just to clarify for voters. Are there any conditions on U.S. military aid that you would support?
So all foreign aid is conditional. That's just the way the law is written. Nobody gets a blank check. But going beyond that right now, I think is a very precocious position for the Middle East. We cannot tie Israel's hands. I've been to Israel. I've stood in the bomb shelters. I've been to the borders. They are being attacked by all sides. So they've also been our friend and our partner in the Middle East for decades and decades and decades. And right now, we cannot afford to lose that democratic partner in the Middle East.
Some people in this race have criticized Israel for what they have called humanitarian rights violations, international law violations, genocide. It's not just candidates in this race, it is human rights organizations, scholars, and the likes. Do you believe Israel has violated international law in any way since October 7th?
So we cannot boil down literally 1,000 years of history to one word. What I will tell you is right now there is a humanitarian crisis, and it is up to the United States to step up to solve this crisis. As a mom, I can't imagine living in Gaza and not having shelter or food for my child. What we need to ensure is that every human being, because we have to humanize the situation, has the opportunity for shelter, for food, for schools, for hospitals. And we need the Palestinian people to be at the table to rebuild Gaza. It's very concerning to me that we have a president who's talking about building hotels and golf courses there. That's out of the question. People right now need to have hope, they need to have security, and they need to have dignity. And when we have that hope, security, and dignity on both sides of the border, we'll be able to move towards that two-state solution so we can have peace in the Middle East. National security there and national security throughout the Middle East and the entire world.
The current Israeli government under Benjamin Netanyahu has indicated it's not really interested in a two-state solution. I understand people kind of in the response to this say, well, there's probably going to be a future Israeli government, and that's probably true. But to the question of, why continue to support a current government that's uninterested in the same peace that Democrats say that they're interested in? What's the response to that kind of question? Who say, why should we continue funding a foreign military that has indicated over and over again it's not really interested in the peace that we're talking about?
Listen, I love my country. I don't like Trump. And the same can be true for Israel. I love Israel, the Israeli people, but I feel like they have a leader bringing them in the wrong direction. I'm very troubled by Netanyahu's leadership. The way he cozies up to Trump is a big concern for me. This is not what the Israeli people want. And we need to make sure that that's heard. Leaders come and go, but Israel and the Israeli people, Gaza and the Palestinian people will be there forever. And we need to make sure that the leadership reflects upon their needs and their concerns.
One more question on this topic, and then we can move on to another one. On the question of international law specifically, which is a serious topic, and it kind of has ramifications beyond this specific issue. I mean, if other nations are violating international law and the United States is continuing to fund those nations militarily, there would be serious questions about whether we should continue to do that. Would you support an independent investigation into whether this Israeli government in the past few months has violated international law in any way? And if the result of that is yes, as I think a lot of human rights organizations have indicated it is, would you then support any form of additional conditions or blocking of military aid to the Israeli military until something changes?
We need transparency. I have no issue whatsoever with making sure everybody is following law, especially international law. And we need to know what is going on. When it comes to military aid, we have an MOU that we need to carry out. And again, no aid is unconditional. There are no blank checks.
Okay. I want to move on to another topic, and that's the topic of ICE, which has remained a very important topic in this community because of the federal government's immigration presence in the 9th District, in Evanston, in Chicago, in Skokie, and of course in the greater Chicago area more broadly. We're recording this on February 11th, like I said, so we're a few weeks out from the shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. You filed a bill in Springfield that would bar ICE agents hired in this current Trump administration from working in state or civil law enforcement. But I think what I've realized is that that bill wouldn't necessarily have prevented these agents that have killed Alex Preddy in Minneapolis and Renee Good in Minneapolis from working in civil and state law enforcement because they were hired before 2025, and they also, one of them wasn't an ICE officer to begin with. Do you think that there needs to be more done at a state level? I understand that your bill would get some place in preventing untrained ICE officers from working in state law enforcement, and it has received criticism from Republicans. But what more has to be done, and do you think that that's even remotely enough, considering the facts of the two shootings that have really shaken the nation?
No, this is an issue that is tearing our community apart every single day. ICE has hired 12,000 people since January. And my concern and the reason why I filed this legislation is after the George Floyd shootings, our police departments have worked tirelessly to regain trust within their communities. Our police officers receive years of training, crisis intervention training, mental health training. If you look at these people who are trained or hired under Trump's reign of terror, they used to get 5 months of training. Now they get 47 days. And then they're being given a weapon and they're set free on our streets. And the result of it is an absolute disaster. We now have children who are going to grow up without their mom. We now have a mom who's going to grow old without her son at her side. And these are just two examples of what has happened. As states, we need to draw the line in the sand and say that this is not acceptable. We have states' rights and we're going to do something about it. Each state is like a petri dish. And when it works here, other states will do it, and then eventually we'll get it done at the federal level. But I think this is one step that's very important to take. We passed laws back in November saying that if you are assaulted by ICE, you have the right to take it to court if your civil rights were violated. And masking is part of that when you take it to court. That is a big step. We also put safety around our schools, around our courthouses, around our daycare centers. Could you imagine if you are a woman who's a victim of domestic violence and you go to the courthouse for an order so that your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend can no longer come near you, and you're kidnapped from those steps of the courthouse? What are you going to do? You're going to stay in your abusive situation because you're afraid of coming forward. That is the wrong message. We need to turn this back. And as Democrats, as human beings, not only do we need to stand up and use our voices to say that this is unacceptable, but we also need our laws and change in the laws to get this job done.
There's some concern, kind of shifting a little bit. There's some concern amongst Democrats on future elections and the security of future elections. Of course, we're going to have an election here in Illinois. I don't think there's a lot of concern amongst Illinois voters that they're going to be safe going to the polls. But Donald Trump recently has talked about nationalizing elections in states that don't require voter ID or other issues that he raises. There's also some questions about whether Mike Johnson will seat a Congress in a close election if there is, the control of the House in balance. If you're elected and you're sitting in the Capitol on January 3rd, 2027, and there are constitutional concerns, I know you taught constitutional law, there are constitutional concerns about how about seating a Congress or swearing in members that could decide the fate of the balance of power. What would you do?
I could tell you one thing. I would use my power of my voice and my power of my position to make sure we get it done. This is it's insanity that this is even part of the conversation. We're very lucky that we live in the state of Illinois. In Illinois, we've got some of the most progressive voting laws in the country. You know, we have you can get your mail in ballot with no questions asked. You can start voting early already. We're going to have early voting set up at the beginning of March so you can go in person voting to early vote. We even made the federal election day a national holiday here in Illinois. We want people to cast a ballot. I have a lot of concerns about what's going on right now with voting, because not only does Trump and his administration want to take it over, but let's talk about the mail system and mail-in ballots, because up until this year, you could mail in your ballot on election day, have it stamped, and your ballot will count. Now the federal government is saying, no, you've got to wait until your ballot is processed or your mail is processed before your ballot will count. So you could go and bring your ballot in the day before the election, think your vote is going to count, but they're not going to process it till later and they're going to throw it out. So we have been trying to get the message out to people that if you are going to vote by mail, get it in early, because we have to make sure we push back, we have our voices heard, and that we have election laws, not only in the state, but in this country, that reflect the fact that everybody who's qualified to vote, you're 18, you're a US citizen, you can freely cast your ballot without fear and without consideration that your ballot won't count.
I want to wrap up here in a moment, but I do want to give you the opportunity to kind of close out this and, a final pitch to voters who are still trying to make their decisions, with early voting really starting to kick off tomorrow in Chicago, and then, of course, across the rest of the district at a later time. There's some questions in the Democratic Party about change, the need for change, new ideas, new voices. You've been in Springfield for over a decade. Why is that the change the Democratic Party needs in this district? It's been represented by essentially two people since the 1950s or 60s. A very long time. 20 plus terms for Sidney Yates, 14 terms for Jan Schakowsky. Why can you assure voters, and how do you assure voters, that you're not going to sit in Congress for another 25 years? And is your candidacy the right kind of change that this party needs and this district needs, with a vast array of candidates that are, like I said at the beginning, very different from one another and all have very different ideas? What's your pitch on why that should be you?
My pitch is I'm the one who gets the job done. And when I came into the Illinois General Assembly, I said I wanted to make change that people told me was not possible. And you know something? I did it. I made the change. I've stood up for my constituents. I'm consistent. I'm reliable. And I get done what needs to be done. Listen, more than a dozen organizations have called me the Legislator of the Year. A nonpartisan think tank has said that I am the most effective senator in Springfield, aside from our Senate president. I think that message sends a lot. The fact that I have 100 local and state people in political positions, current or past, who are supporting my candidacy because they know I get the job done, tells people that I am somebody who is not, I'm going to say, a seat warmer, who's not somebody who talks the talk but doesn't walk the walk. I get in there, I dig into the policy, I do the job, and I make people's lives better as a result of it. And that's why people should support my candidacy.
State Senator Laura Fine, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.